The Attorney General in Florida might join FSU's fight against the ACC, and she wants all the other AGs from ACC states to join her.
You are Locked On ACC, your daily podcast on the Atlantic Coast Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
As we crossed into territory of a question that has burned for decades and various different issues, how much should the government get involved in issues of sport? Is that a good idea? We'll discuss that today. We are Locked On ACC. I am Alex Donno from Locked On Canes. He's Kenton Gibbs from Locked On Wolfpack. Thank you so much to the everydayers for making Locked On ACC your first listen and your first watch today. We're part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I admit I have a competitive side, and it's a big fan of Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist on classic Monopoly. So join your friends and download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store or on Google Play. Now, Kenton, when I started reading today about Ashley Moody, the Attorney General in Florida, who sent a pretty passionate letter that was revealed on Tuesday, that had come out shortly after the ruling in the state of North Carolina that said Florida State had waived their sovereign immunity when they joined the ACC. To hear an attorney general wants to get involved, I'll admit my initial reaction as a resident and a taxpayer in the state of Florida, my initial reaction is, how's this going to affect my tax money? Is this really necessary? But we'll get into the weeds here, Kenton. I will say that after reading some details from this letter, I can understand why a state AG would feel the need to try and protect a state institution from the issue at hand here is sovereign immunity, which we'll get into. So I will admit that I'm at least half won over by reading her comments.
See, and this is why you're so great for this show, Donno, because you're so much nicer than me. You're so much nicer than me. After reading her comments, I am stuck with more questions than answers, because why would the fellow AGs join you? If we went state by state and said, okay, this school wants to leave as well, their AG is going to want to get them out of this contract to get them into something better. How many of them have somewhere better to go?
Here's the thing, though. Here's the thing. I think that obviously I'm sure that the motivation for her argument is to try to do what she feels is best for a state institution. Florida State wants to get out. She wants to help them out in any way she can. But the point that she raises that's kind of interesting, Kenton, is basically pleading to these other state AGs that if you allow sovereign immunity to be surrendered so easily in this case, even if you may not want to leave the ACC, if you allow your sovereign immunity to be surrendered, then what kind of precedent does that set for this to happen in other cases that you may be more passionate about than this one? That's the part that made me understand. Even if that may not be her primary motivation, I think it's a valid argument.
And here's the thing. I understand that argument, and I get the heart of that argument, but you have to then realize just because that's the heart of your argument doesn't mean that that's the crux of this case. Those are two separate things. The heart of your argument may be you do not want to give up your sovereign immunity immediately, but the crux of this case is whether or not a bad deal that was signed has to be honored. That is the crux of the entire case. Now, when we get past the detail of, hey, that is important and you don't want to give that up because in future cases, it can also be given up so easily. Sure, if I sign a document that I agree to give it up in, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That's the part of this that I think is not being given the proper weight by the Attorney General there. Again, I'm sitting here wondering if every AG were to join, right? And again, I said Syracuse, for example, and New York's AG, what would they do? But there are so many others. Even if you look at North Carolina's AGs, where I'm located, do you see UNC, NC State, and Wake Forest all saying, all right, we got to go? Because again, you're left then asking for those universities, where do each of them land?
Right. Yeah, that's a great point.
If you don't have an answer that's in the Big Two, then congratulations, that state's out. Do it again with the state of Virginia. That state's out. You see what I'm saying? Like state by state, even if they were to agree, hey, we do not want to give up our sovereign immunity easily. Absolutely. But in our fight to hold our sovereign immunity, we're also going to cut the legs from under our universities. It just doesn't make sense.
No, that's a great point. And let me translate the legalese. I'm not a lawyer. I only play one occasionally on Locked On ACC. But so sovereign immunity, and thank you to the Tampa Bay Times for offering some context. I was also reading some bits on warchant.com and on On3 about this specific case. But sovereign immunity, it shields states and state entities from legal action. So in this case, Ashley Moody wrote that, the North Carolina judge had ruled that Florida State, a state university, had waived its sovereign immunity against being sued by joining the ACC. Under that logic, other states with public ACC schools risk potential litigation. Here's a little bit on the letter that Moody wrote to the other state AGs after that ruling in North Carolina. This from Warchant. The letter was dated April 17th, 2024. And addressed to California Attorney General Rob Bonta. Remember, 2 teams from California are coming into the conference in a couple of months. Georgia Attorney General Christopher M. Carr, Kentucky Attorney General Russell Coleman, Pennsylvania AG Michelle Henry, South Carolina AG Alan Wilson, and Virginia Attorney General Jason Myers. She wrote to them, "It is because of the potential breadth and impact of the trial court's claimed waiver of sovereign immunity that I write to each of you. The potential impact of the ACC lawsuit could subject Florida State to a loss of more than $500 million. I'll circle back to that in a second. Any waiver of sovereign immunity, especially one of such a magnitude by a state entity, should require an especially clear waiver of its sovereign immunity." And she doesn't feel that clear waiver was in there. But I want to circle back to what she refers to as a potential loss of $500 million. What she's referring to there is, if the ACC's grant of rights is upheld, that it would cost in the neighborhood of $500 million to leave the ACC. The way that she phrases that letter makes it seem like Florida State will be forced to pay that $500 million, which is not. Those are alternative facts, Kenton, because they would only pay the $500 million. It's their choice to leave the conference and pay that. So we go down deeper in the Alice in Wonderland rabbit hole. Okay. So if she's arguing that Florida State would be forced to pay $500 million, which would be their choice if they want to leave the conference, then they could then turn around and say, well, listen, if we stay in the ACC till 2036 or whatever, then, we're quote unquote losing revenue compared to the Power 2. They're bringing in so much more money and it's unfair to us. And I from a certain point of view, as Obi-Wan Kenobi would say, I see some validity in that. But then the ACC's point of view would be, again, you willingly signed the document. You willingly agreed to this grant of rights. And on we go around the carousel of arguments. And that's why I don't think this case, or these cases, I should say, are going to get settled anytime soon.
Yeah, and I agree. I think that there's the whole argument is boiled down to one question. How much weight does the grant of rights have? If it's legally binding, if there's no way around it, if there's no way under it, over it, and you got to go through it, pay out that $500 million. But if there's some wiggle room, if there's something that makes it pliable, then we're looking at a very different situation now. Yeah,
no doubt. So I don't know if anything's going to come out of this. This letter was sent a little over a week ago, or exactly a week ago, actually. So I don't know if anything's going to come out of this, but the Florida State Attorney General is thinking about getting involved, and she wants to see if she can get a whole band together. We'll talk some football throughout the rest of the show, because I'm reading articles today, Kenton, as much ACC football material as I can digest, and it's being asked what certain college football playoff contenders, questions that they will need to answer to make sure they get in this year. And Florida State, of course, on the field is at the center of that as well, because they are the favorites right now to win the ACC. But then I'm looking at this 12-team deal. We got 12 teams this coming season. In a couple of years, we'll have 14 teams. I hope the ACC gets more representation than just a conference champion, right? Because you've got the 5 spots at the top that go to the highest ranked conference champs. Then you've got the 7 at large. And you go through the projections. Obviously, they're expecting multiple SEC teams to get in, multiple Big Ten teams to get in, and then slim pickings for the rest. What needs to happen for the ACC to get multiple teams in, and how many? My friends, you want to keep it locked right here. Alex Donno from Locked On Canes, Kenton Gibbs from Locked On Wolfpack with you. We are Locked On ACC. And I know you're keeping it locked to FanDuel because you're winning money. You're having a great time watching these games. And guys, this is the best time to get in on the action at FanDuel.com. It's playoff time in the NBA and the NHL. Baseball's in full swing. And FanDuel, that's your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. You can bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks. Guys, I love those player props. I love the over-unders. It's all on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Thank you so much for making this episode of Locked On ACC your first listen and your first watch today. The Locked On NFL Mock Draft is available now. Find the ultimate 6-episode series on Locked On NFL Draft to hear who the local experts on Locked On are picking for every NFL franchise, with live reactions from local college football experts and even the fantasy football angle. The Locked On NFL Mock Draft, it's available now on Locked On NFL Draft on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Alex Donno from Locked On Canes, Kenton Gibbs from Locked On Wolfpack with you guys. Kenton, first and foremost, we've talked about it on this show. I think it's fair to consider Florida State to be the odds-on favorites, if even slightly, to win the conference this year. Conference winner is guaranteed a seat at the table in the college football playoff. What would you say is the biggest question Florida State has to answer? Because I look at, to me, it's all on the offensive side of the football. I think their defense is going to be elite. DJ Uiagalelei, experienced. I think he can do the job, but I also wonder if they're going to have enough receivers to help him do that job this year. Oh, you're muted.
And that's absolutely the question that has to be answered. Do you have enough to pitch it around the yard? I mean, we all know that if this was a team in the early 2000s or so, they'd be prohibitive favorites by a mile and they'd be seen as a national contender. But the reality is, in today's game, you have to be able to throw the ball at a high level. You have to be able to stop teams from stuffing the box when you have a dynamic running attack. Even if you've got multiple backs that can do it, they're still going to load up that box, and you have to make it lighter via your ability to pass the ball. And is that ability there for Florida State right now is the question, because, you and I both talked about how DJ didn't look phenomenal in the spring game. But again, Florida State spring game is more ones versus ones than you normally see in some other spring games. So you kind of get it with him going up against an elite defense there, which may be the best that he faces all year. But still, it wasn't a performance that left you like, I have full confidence this passing game will be on time, on target, on track when the regular season hits.
Yeah, and I also I expect that Florida State their offense is probably going to look different by the time they're done making transfer portal additions. Yeah. We haven't talked a whole lot about FSU in the portal to this point because they were on a contact ban until the start of this week. So Florida State made virtually no noise the first week in the portal, but that's because going back to the Amarius Mims recruiting situation, they had a punishment that included no contact for the week of, I guess it was April 15th through April 21st, no contact allowed with recruits, no contact allowed with transfer portal. Florida State did just lose a receiver in the portal earlier this week who was, I don't think he had played. He had a redshirt year his first year, Vandrevius Jacobs, who is considered to be a talent, high upside guy. I don't know how much of a factor he would have been this year. Sometimes when you do see younger players enter the portal, it's because maybe they weren't expecting to play a whole lot. So I don't know how big of a loss that's going to be for FSU, but I do expect the portal king, Mike Norvell, to do some shopping here.
Oh, absolutely. Norvell is a master at portal combat. He is one of the best at it. And I'm going to tell you, the reality is it's a combination of how you develop guys and the portal, because we've seen time and time again that if you fully go all in on one way or the other, you're not going to have great results. And part of what made Norvell so effective in the portal is that all of his guys in the portal last year had multiple years in the program. Verse was there for multiple years. Jordan Travis was there for multiple years. Johnny Wilson was there for multiple years. the only one-year guys that you think of on the offensive side of the ball were Keon Coleman and I believe Bell, the tight end. That's it. Everybody else was there for multiple years. So I'm sure that Norvell is going to get in the portal and go get some more big-time players. But it's still, unless there is, we're talking like the wide receiver from Penn State that's phenomenal and all that, unless it's like a guy like that, I'm going to have questions about this passing game.
Yeah, no doubt. Who do you think are the other top contenders to get a spot, whether it be a potential conference champion or an at-large bid, right? Because, and I got to tell you, and I know we talked to our guy Dalton Pence from Locked On Louisville a couple of shows ago. He assured us nothing to see here. But then I keep seeing more and more Louisville players entering the portal, Kent. Like, it's getting harder and harder not to think they may come out of the portal with a worse team than they had entering into this April portal. Wesley Walker, a safety, is the latest one to hit that transfer portal for Louisville. They had 4 exits the previous day, 3 players, including Penny Boone, who left in the portal last week, which is, a guy who hadn't actually played at Louisville, but one of the top running backs in the country. That was a big loss for what they would have had next year. So I don't know. Like, we'll see how they finish, if they can stick the landing now that they've opened up some roster spots. But I don't necessarily feel better about Louisville now than I did a week and a half ago.
Dalton may have sold us a limit in terms of information because we're seeing some not great things coming out of the portal in terms of Louisville. And I'm not saying that Louisville is losing their top guys and guys that were supposed to be super contributors all over the place, but there is a little bit of a concern there. That's just the reality. That's just the nature of the business. And for Louisville, the questions are similar to that of Florida State in that how do you pass the ball? Because Tyler Shuck, can he stay healthy a full season? Do you have the weapons on the outside to maintain and carry them forward? Those are definitely questions that you have with Louisville. And also, I hate to say it, but in the running game as well, when you lose a Penny Boone and a Joe R. Jordan and all that, you're asking yourself, even though Penny Boone never played a game in the Cardinal red and white, what's going on there? What do the skill positions look like? How loaded are you? Those are questions that need to be answered for Louisville. And when you talk about other contenders, I see NC State and Clemson as the other two that a lot of people are going to look at here. And both of those teams, massive questions. NC State, what's the linebacking core look like? What does the depth look like for your offensive line? Because if you have 1 or 2 injuries to that offensive line, all of a sudden you're looking at a very different situation there. Clemson, how has developing these high schoolers worked out? Can you prove us wrong that you all don't need the portal? Because it's looked like at many points in time you all have needed it, but can you prove us wrong now in showing us, hey, our high school guys are developing just fine to win 11, 12 games and get us to the playoffs? These are questions that need to be answered. Is the quarterback going to be rolling right there in Cade Klubnik? Has he grown to make better decisions? We all talk about the talent and potential. Eventually, potential has to be realized, or else it's just hopes and dreams and fairy dust. It's a fugazi, it's a fugazi, it's a weasel, it's a wazoo. It isn't real. So at some point in time, Cade Klubnik has to pull it all together and produce in order for folks to start believing in that team.
It's a put up or shut up year for Klubnik. Like, this is
1,000%.
He's got to have the season of his life. And I can make a case as to why Miami should be in the mix. I think that there is, for the Miami Hurricanes, I think the 2 biggest questions everyone will have is question number 1, a lot of new faces. How do they mesh and gel together? I definitely appreciate what I've seen during spring football, being able to cover Cam Ward up close in person. I think he's the real deal, Kenton, and not only on the field, like, he looks great out there, as people were able to see in the spring game how sharp he was, but he learned all of his teammates' names within 24 hours. I know I couldn't do that, and he's really, really been proactive when it comes to organizing workouts. He's really attacking this coming season with a lot of seriousness. But yeah, the question about putting so many new pieces together, and then people will also say, how much will the head coach stand in the way when it comes to game time decisions? People will always have those questions about Mario Cristobal until he answers them. I also I can definitely speak, though, Kenton, for Miami's approach.
Yeah.
They are conducting themselves in the transfer portal like a team that thinks they can, or at least should, win now, where they've been very aggressive for Damian Martinez, the top running back available. He's getting crystal ball predictions to land at Miami. He's got an official visit starting Thursday through Sunday. We'll see how that goes. If Miami can seal the deal for Damian Martinez, I think a big need that's kind of a question mark right now is, can you get another starting caliber defensive tackle? Because they just lost a guy in Jared Harrison Hunt, who is a senior, doesn't necessarily have an NFL ceiling, but he's got a very high floor, would have been an important rotational piece. I think you need to find a defensive tackle. I think you need to find a cornerback. They are looking at several of those. And I think that they could also, more of a luxury selection, look at wide receivers. But Miami seems to be aggressive, like a team that thinks they should be in position to win this year. And I also will say, Kenton, for the Hurricanes schedule, their toughest non-conference game is at Florida, which is a team that they probably should beat. Winning at the Swamp is never easy, though. But Miami on paper looks better than Florida, at least right now. And I would have said that their two toughest in-conference games, obviously Florida State, who they play at home this year. But then I also look at Louisville on the road, and if things keep trending the way that they are right now in Louisville, maybe that's not going to be quite as difficult of a game as you thought it initially was. Outside of Florida, the non-conference schedule doesn't look too daunting for Miami. They have to take care of business in the ACC, which is something they have not done. They've gone 3-5 in the ACC the last 2 years. They've got to prove that this year is different. We'll see if they can do that.
Miami terrifies me because while they have the talent, the 3 C's are what concern me about them, and those 3 C's are things that are not addressed easily. Coaching, culture, chemistry. Those are 3 things that stay in the front of anybody's mind when you're betting on Miami, when you're thinking, how good is Miami going to be? It's rarely ever a talent thing with Miami. It's so rarely a thing where you look at the Canes, you're just like, man, that roster, where are the ball players at? Every time you see NFL guys all over the place, littered throughout a roster, but then you're asking yourself, what happened on game day? You're asking yourself at the end of the season, 7 wins again? What happened? And it's that, again, coaching, culture, chemistry. If they can get those 3 things right, they're absolutely a contender. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. Not just a contender in the ACC, a contender for the playoff.
So when we come back, I want to talk about which ACC teams can we rule out for any chance of making the college football playoff. There are obviously more of those than the ones you could potentially rule in, but my friends, you want to keep it locked right here. Alex Donno and Kenton Gibbs with you on this brand new episode of Locked On ACC. And I know you're keeping it locked to Monopoly Go. I didn't think I could have this much fun playing Monopoly because all I remember growing up was, and I loved Monopoly, but my father, he used to kick our butts and show no mercy. He would stay up till 4 a.m. He would take all my properties, charge me rent on everything. So I developed this competitive side. My competitive side is a big fan of Monopoly Go. I'm sure you've heard of it. It's been downloaded over 150 million times. It's a great twist on Monopoly where you play not one, but hundreds of Monopoly boards in crazy locations, building up amazing cities that bring you big money. But the best part is messing with my friends. I can charge them rent on my iconic properties, just like classic Monopoly. Now I can also heist their vaults of riches for myself. And the leaderboards show me who the biggest Monopoly tycoon is. It's not just my competitive side that loves it. You can team up with friends and people all around the world in timed tournaments and earn huge rewards. Set up the game and get in the game and join your friends, I should say. Download Monopoly Go now free on the App Store and on Google Play. Oh, my friends, we are also brought to you by Game Time. Guys, I get these last-minute deals on the Game Time app. It's the only ticket app that I use. The deals actually get better the closer you get to Game Time, which is incredible. Game Time is now an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app go down the closer it gets to first pitch with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying Major League Baseball tickets. Guys, I love the all-in pricing. They don't tack on those hidden fees at the end with like a bait and switch. No, they show you the price all up front. You get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. And the Game Time lowest price guarantee means Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference if you find seats in the same section and row for less. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code Locked On College for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Alex Donno and Kenton Gibbs with you here on an all-new Locked On ACC. All right, so Kenton, we talked about some ACC teams that have a chance to potentially punch their ticket to a 12-team college football playoff this coming year. Let's talk about who we can rule out. Now, North Carolina. Can they, of course, the quarterback switch from Drake May to Max Johnson, I don't necessarily expect that to be a smooth transition, but it's still a team that has talent. Mac Brown has won some big games, not usually in November, though, and not usually in bowl games. Can you rule out UNC, or do you think they could actually punch their ticket this year? Oh, you're muted.
Sorry, keep doing that. Anyway, yes, you can rule them out. That's a soft team. They got a soft chin. I'm sorry to tell you, that is not a team that I look at and I think to myself, they have a certified identity that you need to be afraid of. And what do I mean by that, right? You look at everybody else, all the contenders, they have something that you say, oh, this is who they are. Florida State, we talk about Norvell in the portal. They're going to overwhelm you with talent, and they're going to overwhelm you with defensive talent, particularly. All three levels, talent. Guys that are going to lead at all three levels. You look at Clemson, you talk about DBU, you talk about defensive backfield that you know is going to get it done every single time. And they used to be known for their wideouts who were just freaks in nature with that run with Mike Williams, Hopkins, all that, and their quarterbacks too with Trevor Lawrence and Deshaun Watson and all that good stuff. When you look at this team, what is their identity? You want to say, well, it's running the ball with Hampton, of course. Okay, sure. But if your offensive line isn't good, how well can you run the ball? How well can you do that? So I think this is a team that lacks an identity. They lack toughness. I'm not sure. Defensively, we don't even want to get into what they are because we've seen North Carolina offenses that put up 35 points a game, and they still end up 8-win teams because the defense just can't get it done. So, this is, we can rule them out.
I'm going to rule out these remaining teams. Tell me if you disagree with any of these. And I'm not saying I expect all these teams to have crap seasons. Like some of these teams are going to be over 500. I just don't see them as semi-realistic college football playoff contenders. So I think that they could, as we've talked about, they could surprise a few people, but I'm ruling out Virginia Tech. Mm-hmm. I am ruling out Duke. I'm ruling out Syracuse. Some people might try to make a case for SMU, but that jump from group of 5 to Power 4, they're not going to be in the playoff mix. I'm sorry. They had a great season last year, and the G5 is a different animal. They could have a nice year. I'm ruling them out. I know you're higher than most on Narduzzi. Are you ruling out Pitt? I mean, they're what 4-8 last year. I'm ruling them out.
They're out. I don't see anything. When your star defensive end is saying, I don't think we can win ball games and he leaves.
Fair.
He knows the program better than I do. He knows it. I mean, I'm just being honest. So if he don't believe it, I can't believe it.
And they were, by the way, I was being unkind. They were 5-7 last year, not 4-8. Still a losing record. Georgia Tech was also 5-7 last year. I think we both definitely think that they can overcome their 5.5 win total, and you'll make some money on that over, but I don't think they're going to go over enough to be a playoff contender.
I will tell you this much. If all the teams that we're mentioning right now in this, we can go ahead and count them out, I say Georgia Tech and Virginia Tech are the ones I give the best odds of surprising us and us looking up being like, wait, are they actually doing this? Those are the two teams that I get the best odds, but I still wouldn't say that, just if I had to put my house on it, I wouldn't bet on Georgia Tech being in the playoffs.
Nor would I bet on Wake Forest, Stanford, who were 3-9 last year,
Absolutely.
Virginia 3-9 last year, or I think this is the end of the list. Boston College at 2-10. Because remember, a lot of people have Notre Dame in their playoff. They are not a football member of the ACC, so they do not count. I'm ruling out the remainder of those teams.
You know how I feel about Bill O'Brien. You know how I feel about him. I think he's one of the biggest frauds in not just the sport of college football. In football in general, I don't see it. He's a part of Bill Belichick's coaching tree. That tells me enough.
That's right.
That tells me enough. Bill Belichick has not put out anything successful out of his coaching tree. Nothing.
No.
Not a thing.
That's true.
So I believe that Bill O'Brien, In the words of the great ancestor Maya Angelou, when someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. Bill O'Brien has showed me who he is multiple times. Okay? You're not the guy to get a team over the hump. You may be the guy to get a team where it's like, this team is supposed to be bad. You could push him to 6. You might could push him to 7. I don't believe in him. And if he proves me wrong, I'll gladly eat my crow. But I just don't think that I'll be dining on anything but the sweet, salty tears of Boston College fans this season.
We'll see. We'll see come December if any crow is served. If Bill O'Brien can get his team, it would be the greatest Rocky story of all time if Boston College goes from 2-10 to college football playoff. Oh man! So they were better than the
yeah. Because Castellanos won them a few games by himself, and I believe they went to a bowl game as well.
But, they had a little winning streak in there. Yeah, you know what? I'm looking at that. This is I thought that this was what they were saying their record was. This is their predicted record for next year. But I
don't think they'll win 2 games. I think Castellanos alone is good enough to get them 4 if Bill O'Brien gets out his way. I think that he's good enough to get them 4. But again, I don't trust Bill O'Brien at all. I don't trust him. No. I don't believe in him. I don't believe in his ability to recruit at a high level. I don't believe in his ability to call plays at a high level. I legitimately look at him the same way that I look at a former ACC coordinator in Matt Canada. And how does he keep failing forward? How does he not do good jobs and just keep getting better jobs? I don't get it, but here we are.
Yeah, here we are. Well, we will talk to you guys again tomorrow. He's Kenton Gibbs from Locked On Wolfpack. I am Alex Donno from Locked On Canes. We are Locked On ACC. We will talk to you next time on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.